Hey there, Don the Idea Guy with day 23 of VEDA, a video every day in August. Today's prompt question asks for your favorite motivational quote. And I'm going to share two favorites of mine. They're from the same author, so we'll say it's a single source of the inspirational quotes. Uh, by Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich. It's kind of funny. It's one of those classic books that everybody's heard about, but not everybody has read. I was fortunate to run into this book probably in my late 20s. I'd heard of it before then, but just never read it. And it was recommended by Jeffrey Gitomer, who has a great quote that says, if you want to get some new ideas, read something that was written more than 70 years ago. So he often references Napoleon Hill. I pick up this book, and I was working in a printing company at that point, and I read it at least once or twice a year now. I get something new out of it every time, but even after I had already come up with the concept or started using the concept of Don the Idea Guy, I ran across a quote in here that I ended up finding in one of those accessories catalogs. It was a tiny card about the size of a credit card. It had this exact quote on it, and I carried it in my wallet for years until it got old and finally cracked in half. I probably need to pick up another one because I enjoyed carrying it around with me. But the first quote that I ran into and just immediately applied it to, wow, this fits perfectly with Don the Idea Guy. And it's in a chapter called, appropriately, Imagination. Within Think and Grow Rich. And the quote is, generally speaking, an idea is an impulse of thought that impels action by an appeal to the imagination. All master salesmen know that ideas can be sold where merchandise cannot. Ideas can be sold where merchandise cannot. Ordinary salesmen don't know this, and that's why they're ordinary. You can tell it was written a long time ago because it's salesmen instead of salespeople. I tend to try and correct it myself. So, I read that. I live with that quote. I carry it around with me for, a decade. And it's not until I read this maybe 5 years ago, 7 years at most, where I was reading it again. And at that point, I was working in radio. And the very next page starts talking about how radio was just coming into being and people didn't believe in it. And Napoleon Hill predicted great success for people who were creative who went to work in radio. And one of the quotes that leads into it here is, there's no standard price on ideas. The creator of an idea makes his own price. And if he's smart, gets it. So it goes back to the value of creativity. And that's what I always try and do as Don the Idea Guy is an idea is worth what somebody thinks it's worth. And if somebody sees value in the idea and they see that they can put it into action and make a fortune out of it, it's $1 million idea. But if somebody looks at the idea and goes, oh yeah, I think it's interesting, who knows, they're not going to do anything with it, it's worth nothing. And that led me to create my own quote, which was, an idea that's bold is worthless until sold. So those two ideas, those two motivational quotes from a book that is decades, a generation old, maybe 2 generations old, led to and fed into my own philosophy of creativity. And they're just as true today. I recommend this book to everybody. I buy copies of them when I see them on sale. I gave these as gifts to my sales team when I was working at the station. And, the guys who read it, the men and women who read it benefited from it. And the ones who didn't just continue to get the same stuff every year. Because the extraordinary salespeople know the value in a new idea and how to put it into action. And the ordinary ones don't. And that's why they're ordinary. This has been Don the Idea Guy in day 23 of VEDA. Wishing you well, wishing you lots of fortune with your ideas. And I'll see you again tomorrow.